For the September Smash That Small Pad collaboration, I am using up the Woodland Critters paper pad and decided to bring you all along with me, and you can see what I make as I make it. Hey guys, it's Beth. Welcome. Like I said, I'm using the Scrapping for Less Woodland Critters 6x6 paper pack that I've had in my stash for a few years for this month's Smash That Small Pad collaboration that I do with my friend Sarah, who is Crafting and Relaxing here on YouTube, and Kathy, who is Stampin' Cat over on Instagram. Each month we just pick a small pad, something smaller than 12 by 12, and work on it until it's used up. And I decided to make this a process video, so you will see me kind of work through this pad as I go and see what I make. I'm going to start this pad out using the Sheetload of Cards sketch from September 2022. This is from Call Me Crafty Al, and I will link her video in the description box below where she talks about how you can find this particular sheet load. And I did share the finished cards in my sheet load collab team video at the beginning of this month, but I get a lot of requests for my sheet load process, so here it is. I'm tackling this like an assembly line. I took three patterns, 2 of each, and cut them down based on the cut guide from the sheet load. And now I'm going through pattern by pattern and adding adhesive to all of the pieces of that pattern and adding them to my card bases, which I have already cut. I have also already cut the oval and the scalloped oval where my sentiment is going to go. I ended up using my silhouette because I didn't have any ovals that matched the scalloped oval shape, if that makes sense. I had 2 different brands of ovals and scalloped ovals, and one was more narrow, one was wider. So anyway, I just used my silhouette so I could size the regular oval and the scalloped oval together so that they're the same shape, and then just stamped on them all using my MISTI. I cut mats for this little piece that's going to go across the middle of the front of my card, and again working by pattern. The sheet loads go fast anyway, but I like to do mine in this assembly line style where I add adhesive to as many pieces as I can before I put them down. That's just how I work. I know not everybody works that way. So I'm getting to the last piece here, and I love that little mushroom pattern. And this isn't really a fall pad, but that's what I'm going to be using it as because of the colors. So I decide to try and map out which patterns I'm going to mix with which before I get started so that I don't end up with the same 2 patterns for the card mat and that middle piece, which has happened to me many times before. So I have learned to try and map them out before I start working, and then again, assembly line style, I'm working just 1 pattern at a time and putting them on the card mats. Getting to that last piece. I love Alicia's sheet load sketches. They are so great for making a bunch of cards. So if you're sending out cards for an occasion or you're donating cards, these are great sketches to use. I'm doing one of the ovals and then making sure that the top of the oval doesn't go past the normal slimline size, and that way it'll still fit in my envelope. And then I'm just making sure that it will stand upright for the tent fold. And now I can go ahead and put the rest of my sentiment ovals on the scalloped ovals. And again, I used pattern paper for the scalloped ovals. There were 2 patterns that were very much a solid, And so I just decided to use those for my scalloped ovals because I knew they would coordinate and I didn't have to go and search for cardstock that matched. I have a ton of random cardstock, and it's never seems to be the cardstock that matches the colors in the paper I'm using. So decided to save myself the trouble this time. Get this last one on, and now I can go ahead and start adding them to the cards. And again, just trying to figure out if I want a certain color of oval with a certain pattern combo. And just adding glue to the bottom half so that it will stick up over the top of the card. This is such a fun little card to make too. Definitely a change of pace from the norm. I don't make slim lines or mini slim lines very often. And then this design was something, different from what I'm normally making too. So it was kind of fun all around. Finishing up these last few. And I have some ephemera that is also from Scrapping for Less. It was from a fall pack, and so it didn't necessarily go with this pad, but the colors coordinated, so I decided to pull it out and use it with this. And I decided the polka dot pattern there needed something. The other cards had more going on with the patterns and the colors, but this polka dot just seemed kind of blah to me, so I decided to add some of the pumpkin ephemera. And then I also pulled out some old sequin mixes that I had from my Scrapping for Less days, and I'm just trying to figure out where I want to put them on this card around that pumpkin. And so on the white ones I decided to scatter the sequins kind of around, and then on the orange pumpkins I just go 2 on the very left bottom corner over there. And I just went through all of the sequin mixes I had left and pulled out the browns and the golds and the tans. I didn't have any mixes left that were dedicated fall colors, so kind of just went through and harvested the fall colors. So on this card I decided to put my sequins below the mushroom pattern paper because they were getting lost on the mushrooms. And I started out on the first card with the kind of yellowish brown sequins and then switched to the brown because those stood out a little more. And then on this last card I'm going to do the sequins on that middle panel, I believe the sketch actually calls for, and I'm using the yellow ones, the yellowish ones, because you can see those a little better on this particular pattern. They're kind of a yellowish orange, I guess. So this video is sped up 5 times since it is part of a collab. I do want you to have time to go check out Sarah's video here on YouTube and Kathy's post on Instagram. But it's always fun to kind of share these quick processes when I'm working through my small pads. Going through, now that my sheet load's done, going through what I have left and trimming down the strips from those scalloped oval pages that I used, and then figuring out which sides I like for the rest of my cards. I really liked that mushroom image there and thought it might make a great focal point, so I ended up trimming the mushroom down to 3x4 inch size, like a journal card. And now I'm just kind of sorting those scraps that I have left. I'm going to take the rest of these patterns and trim them down to a couple different pieces. So 4 by 5 1/4 for the card mat, and then that's going to leave me with a 2-inch strip, and I believe I trimmed those down to 5 inches, so it's a 2 by 5 inch strip. And then that will give me several cards just by using the strip and the mat piece that I have. I have those other strips left from where I cut my scalloped ovals out and from the mushroom pieces, and so I'm going to use some of those as mats for my strips, my 2-inch strips. Some of them didn't need a mat, some of them I thought looked much better with a mat, so it just kind of depended on the pattern combination I was using. Again, I'm assembly line style, kind of, it's assembly line by card this time, not a bunch of cards at the same time, to get my cards on the card bases. These are now A2 size cards, and just used white card bases again. Kind of fiddled with my pattern combinations there to see if anything looked better than what I had. And we'll finish putting these guys together. This is based off of a card sketch that I've seen before and that I've used before. The card sketch did not have measurements, so at one point I realized that if I'm using 6x6 paper, if I just cut them, to 4 by 5 1/4 and then 2-inch strips, then that gives me both of those elements of the card and uses up pretty much most of the whole sheet. The rest of the sheet of paper I can either use on the inside of my cards or, as some other kind of embellishment on front. So using up the last of those strips here. And now I have some random strips left, as well as those 3x4 pieces that I cut down. So I'm going to use these random strips to kind of combine them and make a little overlapping layout here. And in hindsight, I wish I would have made that shorter strip on the right hand side a little longer. You'll see when I end up using those 3x4-inch pieces on there, these kind of get lost, but hindsight's always 20/20. So on this one, I just decided to use the front and back of the same page to go for a little contrast. Get the last of those put together. And then I decided to bring in some white scrap cardstock to use as mats on those mushroom pieces, because in most cases I'm putting them on the same pattern, so that orange diagonal stripe is going to be behind it, and I didn't want it to blend in. I wanted it to pop a little bit, so that's why I went with the mat, to kind of separate the colors a little bit. Now I'm going to go through, add adhesive to all of these and add them to my cards. It's funny, I grew up in the 70s and our kitchen was orange and brown and harvest gold, and we had mushrooms. Mom used mushrooms to decorate the kitchen. Mushroom canister set, mushroom dishes, mushroom decor. And so now I kind of like mushrooms. It's a little bit of a nostalgic image for me. So this card, I wanted to use up those smaller strips that I had. And so they were 2 inches, and then I ended up trimming them like to 2 different sizes because I didn't feel like cutting them until they fit. So I think there's 2 pieces that are 2 by 2 3/4, and then 2 pieces that are 2 by 2 1/2. And then I just kind of did a mixed grid so that it, was, I don't know, so you had one long and one short on one end of the card, and then one long, one short on the other end. These last bits are strips that were left from cutting the 4 by 5 1/4-inch pieces, and so I decided to make a card front with those. I added adhesive, some ATG, onto the back of each one, and I'm laying them down, but I'm not pushing them down, so that gives me a little bit of freedom to kind of scoot them around and space them out as I need. And now I can decorate the front of all the cards, so I'm just going to go through this ephemera that I have left and combine them with a Scrapping for Less fall stamp set for sentiment. And we'll be finishing those card fronts off. I didn't intend for it, but this turned out to be a very Scrapping for Less video. And if you like the Scrapping for Less patterns, Teresa, who used to own Scrapping for Less, she actually retired from owning her own business, but she now works with the Not Too Shabby shop and puts together a lot of their paper packs and ephemera designs. And so if you like the Scrapping for Less designs, then I will put the Not Too Shabby shop link in the description box below for you as well, and you can go check out their papers. It's very similar feel, and they do have a paper pack, like a paper pad subscription, where if you subscribe, you get 2 different 6x6 pads each month, and they're usually excuse me, really fun. Trying to figure out what to do on this grid card that I made. Wanted to use that big pumpkin, so I decided to use some more of that scrap white cardstock and then use the pumpkin and add the stamp onto the bottom of that piece, and then it just becomes like a journal card. And then I had some more strips left up there, and I thought the brown would kind of help ground the white a little bit, and so I just added those to the back and then finished off that card. In some cases, I'm using scrap white cardstock behind some of the ephemera just to help level it out, especially if I've used a mat behind that strip on the left. And then sometimes I don't need the ephemera is fairly thick, so sometimes I don't need to add the scrap cardstock. Like on the scarecrow, I didn't add tiny pieces of scrap cardstock because you can't really tell once I get it glued down. But I had fun playing with the ephemera and kind of creating some scenes. I really wanted to use the trucks, and so I had thought about it for a bit, and I'm like, I need something to ground it, so I just used a strip, almost like it's driving down the orange striped road. And then I had those apples, and I wanted to use those. I wanted something in the back of the truck, and I was out of pumpkins, so I just decided to throw an apple in the back of the truck. And then I realized once I get it all glued down, it kind of looks like a tomato instead of an apple. But it is almost October, and I'm still getting tomatoes out of my garden, so we'll say, even if it is a tomato, that it's fallish in this case. But get that one done, and I wanted to use the other truck as well, so I'm going to do basically the same thing, just with a bigger strip, and I'm going to add a different sentiment, also from Scrapping for Less, and add it at the bottom of my kind of road strip there. And I stamped twice just in case, and both of them actually came out okay. So get my apple in the back of that truck again, and then glue those down, and then add my sentiment. And now I'm going to play with those super cute little hedgehogs. I thought those were so fun. So I'm going to use those on the next couple cards, as well as that little sign. What I think is fun is that, with the sheet loads and with this card sketch or card design that I'm using, even though you're using the same design for the cards, they all turn out to look pretty different once you get the different paper combinations together and the different ephemera pieces and sentiments on them. So my last few cards, I am working on the mushroom ones and just keeping it really simple and adding the fall greetings at the very top. And now my final card is the strip card, and I was kind of at a loss at first what to do with it. So there was this larger stamped sentiment from Scrapping for Less, and unfortunately my pad is kind of dry, so without my Misty I was struggling to get a clear stamp. Finally got one, and I'm going to end up backing it with some scrap brown cardstock to help it stand out a little bit more, and then use that last cute little hedgehog there. Sometimes these strip cards are hard to decorate just because there's so much going on. And I decided to take a couple pieces of the scrap cardstock there and pop up my hedgehog a little more. And it is heavy duty cardstock, so it's almost like using a piece of foam. So all of my cards are done. These are the scraps that I have left. I'm going to add them to the inside of the cards. I either cut them into fishtail banners or cut them at an angle, and we'll just add them to the card. I didn't think you needed to watch this entire process, so I did cut some of it out. And so once the A2s are done, I realized I never added anything on the inside of those little mini slim lines. So I'm going back to these pieces where I cut the ovals out and cutting off any strips that I can. And then we'll end up cutting those at an angle as well, just so that I can get enough to go on the inside of the 12 sheet load cards. Okay, so I have finished off this paper pack, the Woodland Critters, and I even used part of it, the bottom part of it, to make a bookmark, just because it was like there were no fall symbols. It was just kind of like color. So I thought I needed some more bookmarks to send 2 cards for soldiers. So I just cut off that little strip, rounded the edges, punched a hole, added some yarn. I did that off screen kind of as an afterthought, but so I got the 12 cards from the September 2022 sheetload of cards. And then the cards that I just made, I got another 11 cards. We have a total of 23 cards made using the 23 cards in one bookmark, made using this 6x6 pad. And I had used a few sheets for a card or two last year, or it must have been 2 years ago. But I still had most of the pad left. So scraps, like these were the biggest scraps, and I contemplated cutting out some of these bigger parts here in the middle, but I ended up trimming off the edges to go on the inside of these little tent cards from my sheet load. And then I did have some other little bitty scraps kind of like that. So I'm fine recycling those. 23 cards and a bookmark is good. And then the ephemera wasn't really part of the collection. It just coordinated. But I did have like 3 pieces left, so I will just put that into my fall embellishment stash. So hope you guys got some good ideas from using up the 6x6 pad. Again, please be sure to check out Sarah and Kathy, who are also using up small paper pads this month, to see what they made with theirs. Thank you guys so very much for your time today, and hope you all have a very crafty day.